We will call the meeting to order at 10:06. First up is, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I don't think they require additions or deletions to the agenda, but I did send out some materials this morning. One was the documents from Ken just for FTO, and then the other was the write-up from Loretta, Whit, and Jason. So everyone should have those. We're going to go over them today. It's already part of our agenda, so I'll just call it out that we're doing that, but no changes are needed. Is there a motion to approve our minutes from May the 26th?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, moved by Jason, second by Loretta. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or raise a hand. And
Aye.
opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I'm actually going to pass over committee discussion because that was a leftover from our prior meeting. So we'll go into the level 1 curriculum materials and draft report. Did anyone get time to review the emails I sent out bright and early this morning? I know 3 of the members are present, so it doesn't really matter for them. Whit, did you see, I'm sorry, Dominica, did you see those documents, understanding you're on the road?
I just briefly looked at them, but I wouldn't say like I have a good understanding of them.
Okay, and that's fair. And then Chris and Ken, I saw you nod your heads. So I guess we'll dive into the document from the 3 of you. Give me a second to sanitize my screen and I will share my screen. All right. Oops. Yeah. Is this big enough for everyone?
Yep.
Yes, looks good.
All right. So first paragraph's more of a note. So the idea of this is to summarize into a paragraph what patrol is. Was that what you guys were working on? I apologize. I'm playing catch up from being away. Or was this intended to be something different?
No, that was what we felt patrol level 2 could lead into, or be a, I guess, what we might like to see future or something.
Okay.
And we did throw motor vehicle enforcement in there as well.
Sorry if I'm making anyone sick. So motor vehicle enforcement. This is already higher in the report. Okay. Oops.
Domenica, since you're in the car, this silence is Mark going through, cutting and pasting into a document. It's not that we're not looking at something.
So,
Thanks.
and thank you, Chris, for saying that. So Domenica, basically, we're going through the section of describing what the current responsibilities of level 2 officers are for motor vehicle enforcement. What the team came up with is an officer able to enforce all laws within Title 23.
And I actually think we're almost there. I mean, I think there's only a couple that they can't do from motor vehicle enforcement. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ken or Director. It's DUI number 3, operating aggravated operating without consent. Is there anything else?
For DMV, not off the top of my head, other than
Yeah,
any.
I think it's those 2 plus maybe one more. So I think on that one we're actually really very close. I know Director and I talked about DUI number 3 previously in March. I still kind of don't understand why they can't, other than I know it's a felony. But if they've gone through A-RIDE and done all the training, they should be able to waiver, correct?
So this might be a place where there's contention. So I'm putting on this is 100% Mark's personal opinion hat right now. I fundamentally believe the difference between investigating a felony DUI without death resulting is exactly the same as investigating a DUI 2 with maybe one extra step. And so to that end, can we train a person to review a criminal record? Yes. Do we? I believe so. And does the council have the authority by statute to grant that special certification? In my opinion, yes. I've said this to other people, which has caused pause. We have never crossed that bridge. The council has never granted that certification that I'm aware of. So therefore, while we may have statutory authority, we may depend on either legal analysis, statutory change, or Mark to be told he's wrong. And all are fine.
Nobody has a problem telling you you're wrong, right, Mark?
I just have a problem listening sometimes. And so
I think that, Mark, that does bring up a good point of now that we have legal counsel on staff, this would be a good time for a review of that. Most other things, the statutory authority for level 2 is very clearly defined. And I remember back when that was happening and the chiefs and sheriffs going through each one of those individually to see what a level 2 could do. While I agree in concept that what's the difference between a DUI number 2 and a DUI number 3, short of there being some aggravating circumstances, it was something that was not left out. It was intentionally left out of the statute, but there was that caveat to give an expanded scope of authority. So I think that's a good legal opinion that we should research in-house first and come up with an answer to that.
And I have it right on top of the screen, which is level 2 may practice, in addition to the areas approved based on special certification or training approved by the council. My understanding of the legislative intent at the time was that they were looking at the legislature was looking at how to increase it, and they knew that it wouldn't be all of the things, but this was the starting point while the council worked to elevate training over time. And so my understanding is the legislative intent was to give the council the ability to add on, and that the intent was not to specifically prohibit any felony investigation, this being one of them. The other thing, Chris, that I would just call out, again, the world of Mark's personal opinion, I think it's fundamentally dumb and without common sense that a level 2 cannot investigate a burglary, but a level 3 can say they are not responding.
I don't pull the strings on who says they're going or not, unfortunately.
I totally understand, but I think those are two prime examples of saying, was it the legislature's intent to exclude these laws from being investigated by a level 2, or is it just an acknowledgement that our training does not satisfy it, and that would need to be additional training and or certification as approved by the council? Because as an agency head, those are two I would present as saying, riddle me this. I can definitely understand and acknowledge a DUI fatality resulting, and a variety of other things where more advanced investigatory skills are necessary, crash investigations and whatnot. But those are two that I pull out of the bag as these are low-hanging fruit of common sense from the world of Mark's personal opinion. But we're partially deviating from motor vehicle now. And I apologize. So, coming back to that, so is it fair to say that this is a goal that everyone be able to investigate? Like that's the end outcome?
Yeah, that was the goal. Yeah.
So maybe we can, I mean, this is a fairly easy one. We can just briefly describe what motor vehicle enforcement is. So enforcement of civil and criminal statutes captured in Title 23. Is that a fair statement?
Mark, can I just jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
So just trying to maybe for like clarity's purposes, and I didn't get a chance to look over everything. So are we discussing what level 2 does now and what we want them to do in the future, or are we like what is it that we're talking about? We're talking about we want them to do other things, and is that where the statutory piece comes in, saying, you know, is that a statutory fix saying that that's not what they can do, but we want them to do that?
A fair question.
I guess I'm kind of lost, and I apologize. I'm sure everyone else is more clear on this. I'm not.
If you weren't driving and could look at the screen, it might make sense, the section we're in, but you're not, you're driving. So no, we are currently in the section of what do or can level 2 certified officers do, and specifically around motor vehicle enforcement. So the document that the team worked on is in part future oriented. And so I'm just trying to use their words to spin it for current practice, and I'm discussing that as part of the committee.
Okay, so there's two things going on. There's what the task was that we were supposed to do about, you know, getting level 2 to where they need to be now to have a little bit, you know, to kind of augment the training to have them come up to where they are. And then there's like a wish list of things that we think are possible in the future. Is that a way to think about it?
I'm leaning towards we think about the first part of it, but I'm totally open to the second part being part of the conversation because that's further down in the report. So it's not hurting us, but we're focusing on the current duties right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mark, if I could side rail you for a second, one of the concerns that I have is that I guess early on in meetings, what was really decided upon was that the level 2 folks were already doing more that everyone felt that they had necessary training for. And while all of this is part of the responsibility of this group moved forward with making some very specific recommendations on addressing those deficiencies in level 2 by increasing time and content, and then created a level 1 that did not exist before other than in statute. So those are the two things that While this piece is important, those are the things that I would like to see much more clarity on and discussion on first, simply because this group had spoke about that level 1 and 2 curriculum being delivered in June, which is clearly not happening. And we have talked in the legislature, I shouldn't say we, I specifically have spoken to in the legislature that while committee work is happening, that will create level 1 and more training for level 2. My expectation was that it wouldn't happen until the beginning of the year based on the speed and ability of people to come together and develop what that curriculum is. And so if that's still desire, then those are the things that I need that I feel like that we need to focus on first. And I'm really concerned. And again, this is nobody in particular's fault. Everybody's got a full-time job and time that they can make available for committee meetings. But some of these things that we know are already being taught. So if they're already being taught, why we don't have the curriculum by now is really concerning to me. So I'll stop there.
Anybody have follow-up to Chris's comments?
And feel free to object if people are saying this differently.
Ken?
So I was just going to say that I think the work that Rob Shell's been putting into the courtroom security block is great. But I think we also recognize that it's going to take a little bit of time for that to be finalized and to make sure that everybody that needs to have eyes on that actually does have eyes on that. And I am not familiar enough with the rest of the necessary training for level 1 to be able to anticipate how long it might take to come up with a curriculum with lesson plans and objectives and all the things that we're going to need for that to actually come to fruition. I think Mark, as a subject matter expert in those things, you have a better sense of how long that might take than I would, just in an attempt to answer the executive director's query.
I mean, my response would basically be some of these are not curricula as the academy is currently expecting them to be written, with learning objectives easily defined. What's the learning objective for doing a super load escort? Get it there. Like, we're done. That's pretty simple to say, go do the thing, and we're going to show you how to do the thing. And so here's a slideshow of what the thing looks like. Well, that takes time to develop. And you know how much time it takes to develop that type of thing. So with your concern about it being things that are currently taught, but they're not really being delivered, it's because they're not really formatted in the way they're being expected to be delivered. And then we're depending on people who are not curriculum development coordinators to do it, myself included. So I'm also depending on people who I know are struggling with staffing. So we always know that it comes down to the resources available, and people are tapped for resources. And having trained my staff and knowing others have trained their staff to do some of these things, I'm not lacking any confidence it doesn't exist, but to form it into the model that IATLAS wants us to do is going to take time. It's to a degree the same thing looking at the radar and LiDAR curriculum, which is fully developed by NHTSA. But we still have to do it.
So in fact, should that not be perhaps a realization of this group and a recommendation to the council that, you know, without those resources and or until such time as these things can be developed, that this is something that maybe should not be, you know, an expected outcome without having the ability to deliver it?
So I think that goes into our long-term recommendations. I think, well, how does the committee feel about that?
So before you have committee discussion about that, let me throw one more thing into the mix, okay? So part of, as I read the quick report this morning um, from Jason, Loretta, and Whit, you know, statutory requirement is defined in that document. Um, that's been around for a while, okay? Statutory requirement that has never been resourced. For those who were not or are not a part of that organization, the chiefs and sheriffs just had a joint meeting last week. Mark, I know you were not able to attend that, or at least while I was there, you were not able to attend that. And part of that discussion and part of our last council meeting was around around creating committee work, but also creating a new committee around pathways to certification. And all of that and all of this is really encompassed in that. And that's a lot of work. And that's a lot of work that I intend to get done and have people in that committee that can get that work done. And some of those recommendations might include some of this work. Like I don't want to have dueling committees trying to come up with things that folks say, either I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise, or while we're doing this, it may not be in the way that we're working towards to design training so that it's defensible. So I only bring that up to say, um, this has been hard to get this committee together. And I don't know whether this is something that, based on the work that's been done thus far, that this committee could perhaps maybe make some suggestions that could then be reviewed by that further committee. And so I'll just throw that out there for conversation. I'm not trying to steer that in any way in particular. I just feel bad knowing that I'm going to be reaching out to a group that I'm going to have some very high expectations of as far as delivery goes and recommendations. And I don't want it to be duplicative or in contrast to what this group is trying to do.
Yeah, and I think we previously talked about where is our finish line as this committee. We came in with two directives. One was a short-term recommendation, which we done, and one's long-term recommendation. I never saw our charge as being the end-all be-all to answer all the questions, but rather to illustrate what are the questions that we need to find to answer. And I think that's a really good segue to really hand it off to the next group that does the work to say, what are these things? They're big, meaty issues. There's no question. And I would love to have a recommendation to the legislature of resource the development of these. So Chris, is what I wrote fair to say? What resources, because we've already discussed that before to a degree, is it viable? What resources do we need to accomplish it? And is this an issue for the next committee, and what things are we teeing them up for?
Definitely resources is obviously a thing. You know, the real detractor is, as we all know, you know, positions in state government are something that are frowned upon when you're looking to add. And yet we've been told multiple times from our contractor, and again, they are a contractor, but that by the time our curriculum project is done and we start piloting that in 2027, a lot of that content is going to need to be updated to make sure that it's relevant and it's fresh. Normal staff doesn't do that. You need curriculum development people that can do that. And that's not something that we have on staff. Whether that is a resource that we look for as far as, you know, contracting funds or a staff position is hard to say, but it's going to be continual ongoing work. If the expectation is that our training is going to meet very high standards and what we expect that people should be trained in. So I think that could be a recommendation from this committee moving to the next committee. I think all of the things outlined without having to potentially do a lot of the down and dirty work, like here's what we identify level 1 training should be. It exists in statute, but we don't have it. We don't have the time or resources to put that together and hand that off to that next committee. As part of all of that is in conjunction with an alternate path. An alternate path is not specifically, in my mind, to meet just the definition of statutory requirement, but of all the needs of law enforcement, right? So level 1, what does level 2 do? Perhaps what do specific, law enforcement services that sheriffs do that other law enforcement don't? All of those things should be looked at by that committee and with some substantial recommendations and a pathway for it to happen, not just another discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it might not be time for that discussion now, Chris, but it does make me think about the value of modularity of different curricula. I mean, when we talk about the benefits of patrol procedures across 4 different domains of, well, it might be more than 4, it might be less, but making it up right now. 4 different domains of what law enforcement does. Responding to a domestic requires patrol procedures. Responding to a burglary or juvenile requires patrol procedures. So I see that itself just as one area being its own curriculum. When we talk about fair and impartial policing, it's across all the domains. So is it really its own training? Baseline, sure. But is it something that should actually be built into each course? And so this is where I see there being value of baseline courses and then value in, okay, we have a radar class and we're going to pull that box out. We're going to talk about radar and LiDAR and speed enforcement. And then we're going to put it back and we're going to talk about DUI and we're going to talk about crash investigation, all these different boxes. And so having the modularity where we could say, hey, we want this level 2 who's capable of doing a burglary or capable of doing a DUI 3. Well, maybe we should just look at the DUI box and then consider any of the other baselines that are missing components that the level 2 wouldn't have. And then that's how we could look at those gaps. It's fun stuff.
But I think Chris brings up a good point. Like, what have we promised to deliver from our committee, and are we on track to do that?
Our job is to deliver a report, which is what we're currently going through. Our second promise was to do the short-term recommendations, which we promised and delivered. And our third part is long-term recommendations. And just by the fact that we have struggled with quorum, we have struggled with accomplishing several objectives, and often it comes down to lack of resources. I think the better thing for us to do is say our long-term recommendations are, maybe even to a degree, support the creation of this committee, resource it from the legislature. I think it's almost like we can't accomplish this as a group. So we need to say what those next steps are. I think we're nudging the football.
No, and I agree that, the reason why IADLEST is in is because of this exact thing. Like, we tried to piecemeal and do things that, other, curriculum development, other people, that's what they do. So I don't think it's a terrible recommendation to say, hey, this is what it is. We need other people to actually do it. And it can't just be everybody in their spare time.
Also, I think it needs to be a unified approach with multiple committees. If you have too many committees going off in different directions, I think it's where things get bogged down.
The one thing that comes out at me routinely is that, there was formerly, when this statute came out, and there were levels of certification and a scope of practice, that's where the level 2E was derived from. It was, well, what about all the folks that have already been doing level 2 that have been trained in extensively and been serving for multiple years that are doing sexual assault investigations and other things, right? That's where the level 2E came from. It was an expanded scope of practice were those folks that could identify and articulate and show to the council that they had had that additional expertise of training. And once they did that, the council gave them a granted scope of practice that included a parameter of new things. That's where Witt got his level 2E from. Having said that, the council at the time looked at that as we're fixing a problem of people that are part-time or level 2 that do more than what this scope of practice says. How do we fix that? And they looked at that and said, this is going to be a small number of people looking for additional certifications. And then they sunsetted that program. Now, there has been, and I get why, a need or an ask from those people that have still been doing it for that period of time. Well, how do we eventually get to a level 3 certification? We now created a process for level 2Es to get to level 3. Witt has been the first and only successful candidate to apply for that thus far. But I think not only to his credit, but he can tell you as well, is that it was a lot of work, a lot of documentation on his part, a lot of preparation on his part, and then actually coming back here and doing the work to get there. So it's not a shortcut. It's an additional extensive amount of training that he had to complete to get to where he's at now. So what I don't want to do is continually break up these modules for people that are individualized for a person. There should be a practice by which folks can get to where they need to be, decided upon folks much smarter than me. Leave it at that.
Loretta, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that I think, the report, what we've got, is really good and can, speak for the committee, but I do agree that, our committee wasn't meant to, solve all the problems either. But on the director's point as well, I'm wondering if, because we have a waiver process for people from out of state, is there not such a thing as a waiver process for like the level 2? Like do the review of what their training has been, and this is what you need, and this is how you go about getting that. It should be able to, I don't know if it should be so hard for us as it has been.
To answer your question, Loretta, is there a process? Yes. Is it defined? Not really. For folks from out of state, yes.
Right.
Statutorily, is it okay to do that? Yes. By rule, is it okay to do that? Yes. We don't have, I got recently, within the last couple of weeks, not a waiver, but an email from an individual who had gone through level 3 training in 2016, got out of law enforcement and was out, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and wanted to get back. And prior to this being an established rule, he couldn't because he was out with 3 years. He came back and took level 2 training. He is now a level 2 certified officer. Now that this rule is in effect, the email was basically questioning, can I get back to level 3? Is that unreasonable? No, it's not. He already completed level 3 training. What do we need to know from when he left to where he is now that he would need to update to make sure that he is, on task of where he would need to be? And I think that that's a reasonable ask and a reasonable, solution for somebody. So there is a process. It's just not a streamlined process that fits everybody.
I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say, similar to like a college degree, these are the requirements, and isn't that the work that IATLS has done on level 3?
It's the work that they're doing in level 3 to determine, based upon law enforcement's feedback, what does an entry level officer need to know? And that's where the level 3 curriculum is coming from.
But we have to know what the things that they're going to teach are, so we should have the learning objectives, we should have the general areas of study that are required, and so that's what I would call a module. the
Mhm.
the areas of study. Wouldn't we be able to compare what level 2 gets and what level 3 gets to say these are the gaps?
I guess once it's complete, yes, but the level 2 is not being reviewed in the same way as the level 3 is. The level 3 content is being delivered based on our historical data, what's currently being taught, then reviewed, added to, defined, learning objectives, competencies being built around what we currently teach for level 3 and what law enforcement has identified as a necessary task to complete what their job function is. That same has not been done for level 2. And as you know, not only level 2, but level 3 was basically, historical data that was taught from officers in the field on what's the latest, what's the, the best practice, that information coming from out in the field. So it's not the same process for level 2, but yes, those learning objectives and everything else for level 3 will be clearly identified.
I mean, that could be one of our long-term recommendations is take the work that was developed under the level 3 work with the contractor and work backwards. We can't do it now because it's not available. That's fine. But when I say what's needed for a burglary investigation that a level 3 isn't going to go to, I think we can work out what parts of the curriculum are or are not needed to say, okay, level 2, this is part of the pathway.
There should be some low hanging fruit like that, probably. Might be easy to pick off those first.
Because I mean, really, the level 2 system has generally worked until we started adding in, we're depending on them for patrol.
I don't
From a
think we
sheriff's
started to have
perspective?
that.
I was
I
gonna
think
say,
that's
I
always
think
been the case.
we've always done that, Mark. I was started level 2 in the 90s, and I've always been doing patrol. So
It wasn't level 2 in the 90s, it was part-time, but that then becomes this change of, hey, the 32-hour limitation, what can you or can you not do? Like, if we want to pick the program as a single program across 30 some odd years, we have a moving goalpost. But the liability conversations have always tied back to this conversation around patrol.
Yeah.
I mean, Domenica's, the Attorney General's office, dealing with liability around court security, escorts, traffic control, prisoner transports.
Yes.
Of course.
As related to law enforcement certification?
Well, not certification, but I mean, I think the greater thing for everything, it's not only about officer, liability and those, it's about, our cases, our prosecution, the strength of what we're asking officers to do so that we can, when defense attorneys go up one side and down another, saying about what did you investigate? How do you know how to investigate? How much time did you do this? If another officer did it, how much time would they have done? So it's like, it's a really, the legal part of it is nuanced in many ways. And I know, the liability piece gets the most attention because it deals with money. But it affects all areas of not only prosecution, but liability.
But that all deals with criminal prosecution. And so kind of the nebulous word that always comes up is patrol. And I always call it out. And I know some of you will roll your eyes at me when I do it. But it always comes up with patrol, which always ties back to criminal investigation. And oftentimes level 2s who are not doing criminal investigation, are they the driver for the liability? Are they the driver for that defense argument? I mean, I don't see it. And this is where sheriffs are often saying level 2s worked for us before this whole conversation around patrol came into it. Were there agencies doing it? Sure. We have some in our area. But to me, like a perfect world would be, let's just keep level 2 the way it was in December of 2024 and take patrol out. I'd be happy. The Chiefs would not be. I understand that.
Yeah, I'm lost, and I know, Mark, you bring this up regularly. I'm lost on the concept of patrol because, like, as Loretta points out, when I got into law enforcement back when it was part-time, I was given a set of keys. That was horrible, right? I had 2 weeks of training and they told me to go out and do anything and everything. And that's exactly what I did. And I learned over time all of the responsibilities and all of the nuances before I went to, the full-time training. But I guess where I get lost on patrol is that it people in whether it was part-time before or when it became level 2, people that were going through that process were always doing patrol, except maybe not some sheriffs, but everybody else was. And so I don't know that that increased the liability anymore just because they did a patrol function. I I would almost think that there would be higher liability with transporting a prisoner on a regular basis or doing mental health transports on a regular basis or courtroom security. At least in patrol, can there be a liability? Absolutely. But is it something that you normally would face every single day? I would argue not as much as you would doing a transport or working in the courtroom. So I guess I keep getting lost when you bring up patrol as either problematic or as something that hasn't been done or isn't continuing to be done.
So I would challenge the broad definition of patrol is far more complicated, far more discretion, far more on the off the cuff decision making that oftentimes has to be done with little time or preparation. And so while you might go sit shift Monday night from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. and you might not see a single car, at 1:45 in the morning, you get the call for the domestic, and now you've just been thrown into something. Whereas a transport of a severely ill person with violent tendencies who has an intention to escape from a police car, well, the car's locked. There's equipment that's installed in it that generally prohibits them from getting out. And so what do we need to do? We need basic medical training, and we need basic security training. There's not a lot of decision making. It is drive this person from here to there. So while there might be liability in the context of that person's health and safety, really the training is fundamentally pretty straightforward. They don't have to go make a shoot, don't shoot decision in a highly volatile situation at a domestic. They don't have to understand the difference on trauma-informed interview interrogation skills for sexual assault. Or I'm going to collect these 4 bullet points and pass you along to an investigator, which is kind of the model we're doing now. But back when some of these programs started, that was not the model. So it was the part-time officer, the level 2 officer who was coming in and trying to do the best with what they had. And sometimes it wasn't pretty. And that's part of why I'm committed to improving this program. But I think that these are all part of those broader conversations of that next committee. I mean, what is needed?
Yeah, for me, I think the liability for us in level 2 changed when they changed it from part-time to level 2, honestly, because when I went through as a part-time officer, I was limited to how many hours I could work for 6 months, and then I had to go to the academy, the full-time academy. And that's what I did. So, and it worked. It had those level 2s going to the full-time academy because they couldn't work full-time otherwise. Now you have level 2s working full-time with no expectations to go to the level 3 academy because they don't have to. Because by legislature it changed. I'm not saying that's where they went. The legislature went wrong. Because now you've got people who don't want to go, don't have to go, and won't go because, it's not mandatory. Back when Chris, you and I went, I had a 6-month waiver. If you couldn't go to the first academy, you had to get a waiver, and you only could get one waiver. And if you didn't go, then you were relegated back to that 20-hour a week part-time status. So.
But I'll also submit at that time, law enforcement recruiting and training was at a far deeper pool of candidates. And
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was 25, 26 years ago. So if longer.
the statement's always made that we don't want to lower standards. And I don't have an issue with that. But we also have a challenge in an environment where people are not applying to jobs. And so
Yeah,
what's better? High
yeah.
standards, but no one doing them, or low standards and someone doing them? And like that's a big philosophical question that we're not going to crack open today, but it's something to think about. But I think it comes back to the broader issue, which is how do we get, we're part of a pipeline from hiring, I say we, the law enforcement community, from the agency hiring to the academy training and to the council certifying and broadly watching. I mean, we're part of a pipeline to deliver people to the career field. So is there a way we can make it more accessible? Is there a way we can improve on training?
So I think you just called it out, Mark. I think that's the difference between what we're trying to accomplish versus what I think some folks might be looking at us to do. And when I say us, I really mean you as the committee. Is it a shoring up and recognizing that level 2 training in its current form is not adequate to what we're asking those level 2 folks to do? Also, for them to identify that training that they've had might not allow them to see that they're stepping into a felony situation or something that's out of their scope, because we're not training them the same way we treat level 3. So are we automatically putting them behind the curve with not allowing them to have the full scope of motor vehicle law, criminal law, all the rest of the things that we're expecting them to identify? Hey, I can't go there. But we're not training them that. We're giving them a reduced scope of training. So is the level 2 really supposed to be designed now to allow them to see that information so they don't overstep, while at the same time allowing for a level 1 certification that I think, as you just described, that's danger close to non-sworn, you know? Well, we're all the things that you just argued really are all of those things that in theory could be done by non-sworn personnel. So I think in order to create those paths that we're talking about, we need to not overstep into the alternative path or the increase from level 2 to level 3. I don't think that was the original intent of this committee, and please jump in. But I think if we just look at it from a shoring up the curriculum in the way that we all recognize it probably should be, so that we can straight face put people on the road, and you as agency heads can straight face put people on the road that have had the training to do what we're asking them to do within that scope, then we're good. Beyond that, trying to look at the level 2 to level 3, level 2E to level 3, wherever that looks like, I get it. And is it going to play a part in this at some point? Perhaps, but I don't think that was the original intent of what we were supposed to be doing.
Other thoughts?
I agree with Ken. I've been quiet, excuse me, mostly because I've been confused. And I understood our purpose to be first identify deficiencies in current level 2 training, and then to make suggestions to do the best possible, understanding that level 2 still needs to exist to address those shortcomings. And I'm not sure, I feel like that's the direction. That's where I got confused. I don't know if that's the direction now or if we've had mission creep. Otherwise, I will say the idea of the work of IATLIST, that they're doing the idea of just copying, pasting the level 2 program, having spent a lot of hours reviewing their proposed curriculum, will just create another level 3 because it's so in depth. You won't be able to plug and play. It would have to be watered down because it's so involved. But I do agree with Ken's points.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have
Well,
4
I mean,
minutes. Oh, go ahead, Dominica.
just quick, Mark, to your point about, that, it's also interconnected, right? It's such a house of cards talking about, do we want the right people doing the right things, even though that might result in less people doing it? I mean, I think the right answer is yes, it has to be yes. And, but that also goes to retention or trying to recruit. I mean, there's money issues and there's all those kinds of things. So I sometimes think that it might be nice to kind of call out some of those things, like it's not everything's going to be solved if it's, an easier thing to do, or this is what it is. It's a lot of things that are happening why we're not getting the recruits that we think we should. And I think it's good to kind of point that out too, that fixing one piece of this isn't going to fix everything. But I think the hard answer is we need to have people doing the right jobs, even if it means less people. And what that means as a consequence, I mean, it's for people other than our committee to figure out. But I thought that was the whole purpose of our committee, was trying to make sure that we give people what they need for the expectations that they have now, because it wasn't happening that way.
Anyone else? We have 2 minutes left, and I need to save 1 minute for public comment.
I think a start to increasing the standard there was potentially adding the week of EVOC to the level 2. I mean, that's certainly a start in increasing the training for the level 2 officer, and an important one.
Which we did. Is that right, Ken?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we tried to replicate the current week 9 for firearms and driving as part of the follow-on that level 2 would have to do. Recognizing that if you're a cop and you've got a badge and a gun, there should be a certain level of expectations, regardless of what level of scope you are.
Yeah, I think it's a positive, and that certainly can't be argued. And it's only attainable, and it's reasonable.
Yeah, and one of the things, Jason, just real quick to respond to what you said, if we were to take the level 3 curriculum work there, we're eventually just going to create another level 3. That's ultimately the alternative pathway. And so if we're saying we want to limit knowledge to people because we want them to go through the level 3 academy and only through the level 3 academy, what we're basically saying is we don't want to train the level 2s. And I'm not saying that that's what you're suggesting. I want to be clear. But I've heard that argument made before, which then became that conversation with that individual. And so saying we're going to make EVOC available for level 2s. What does that do? We're going to make domestic violence training available, even though it's outside their scope of authority. What's it do? We're going to make stalking training available, even though it's outside the scope of authority. I don't know if it is or not. It's not. I have to look on that one. But like, what do these things look like? And Ken, to your point, are we teaching them about things that they're not going to be able to work on? Maybe, but maybe that's something they can identify, that this is something beyond my ability. And this is where I like to keep falling back to either the trades model or the college model, which is here's an associate's degree. We're not teaching the associate's degree, all the bachelor stuff, all the master's stuff, but we can build on those things. And so the things that I've heard people sing praise about with the level 3 curriculum, I think there's other ways we could deliver that over time with resources, with development that accomplish the same thing, even for level 2, for level 1. These are all things that we could build out over the next 10 years, but no less. Chris, thanks. It's 11 o'clock. I think we have 2 members of the public here. Ken or Dan, you have anything you want to say?
Go ahead, Dan.
I think I'm all set, guys. I think from everything they got covered today, I think that, yeah.
All right, Ken.
No, I think I'm still a little stupefied by the ILS project, and I think the more and more I see of it, and the more and more comes back in, it's such good work, and it's going to help us codify all the things that we've been doing all along, while at the same time making a bunch of stuff a whole lot more difficult. So I both look forward to it and I dread it at the same time. It's going to be great, and it's going to be, you know, a certified curriculum that we can say, this is what we're doing. I think that'll be fantastic. I think trying to break it up after that, whether it's into modules or in a different learning modality, is going to be challenging, not impossible, but it's like you said, and I think like Chief Solmacher said, it's going to be work. It's an impressive body as it stands, and the pieces that we're seeing now is really good stuff. And it makes my heart happy that when we're called out in a FOIA request or from a smart defense attorney somewhere, to have that and to be able to pass it on to them will be fantastic. But again, trying to figure out how to deliver that to a level 1 or a level 2 will be exciting.
All right. Any other comments from the group? If not, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Loretta?
I'll second.
Loretta makes the motion. Jason seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, you can stay here. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.